Guys, I have been waiting for the day that this exotic was finally something that was usable. Now, it's always had a cool little gimmick, and there has been times before with the right artifact perks and stuff like that, that this has been usable, but never before, more than right now, in Renegades, has the Lucky Raspberry been a viable option to use within the endgame content. Is it just usable? Is it meta? I'm going to discuss that as we go through the video and let you make up your own mind on that, but as usual we will do a full breakdown. I'll talk about the content that I've found this build viable within, and obviously there will be a dim link in the pinned comment as always for you guys to check this build out, and as always let me know in the comments down below whether you're using something similar, whether you're going to try this out, or come back and let me know once you've tried it out what you think. But for now, let's hop straight into it. So I always found that the start is the best place to begin, so let's do that. What exactly has changed with Lucky Raspberry and why are we talking about it now? So Bungie in their armor preview pre-Renegades said that Lucky Raspberry and Arc Bolt Grenades for that matter have been out of the limelight for a long while now, due to their general slowness and low damage. We've done a pass over both Arc Bolt Grenade itself and Lucky Raspberry to help with some of their consistency issues, as well as bring them into today's build crafting options. So specifically to the Arc Bolt Grenade ability, they increase the projectile lifetime of chain projectile, meaning that that jolt spreads between more targets for longer. It helps with consistency on moving targets that are near the outer edge of the chain range. It now activates 0.1 seconds faster after the initial sensor sweep, from 0.6 seconds to 0.5 seconds. They increased the max chain range of the initial chain from 7 meters to 10 meters, which is actually more significant than you would think. And then for the actual armor itself, it now always applies jolts on Arc Bolt Grenade hits, and returns Arc Bolt energy on any application of the jolt debuff, or triggering the jolt chains already inflicted on an enemy. So why is this important, guys? So one of the main issues, personally for me at least, when I've tried to build craft Lucky Raspberry into a hunter build for endgame, is that by the time that whole circular animation happens after the Arc Bolt lands, enemies have already walked out of its radius or walked away from it happening. One, because it was too slow in triggering, and two, because the radius wasn't big enough. Obviously, as we've just covered, they have made changes to both of those areas. The fact that this is triggerable and gives you energy back from any applications of jolt, that is fantastic as well. There are so many weapons now that have jolting feedback on them, and there are a lot of ways within the subclass Arc specifically that we can obviously build into jolt. That means this makes for a fantastic ability loop where we have constant ability uptime, and that's before we even start adding in other things such as blind and other ways that we can control the battlefield and how things go. So kicking things off, we will obviously be going for a full Arc subclass setup today, and my recommendation for your super, despite it being your choice, is going to be Gathering Storm. The reason for this is it can be used for ad clear, and it can obviously be used on single targets as well. Ad dense activities like Lawless Frontier and stuff like that, this will really thrive in there. Obviously it does also apply jolt as well, so that is going to feed back into our Arc Bolt Grenades, which is another nice thing to have in terms of that as well. So for our dodge, we are going to be going for Gambler's Dodge. This is going to give us back that melee ability energy. Obviously this does scale off melee, so we'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about the stat package. In terms of jump, that's going to be completely your preference, and then when we move on to the melee, we'll be taking Combination Blow. Obviously, you can probably see already the aspects that we're using, and this does tie in with those aspects because of some changes that were made more recently than Renegades. Combination Blow will in fact proc with Tempest Strike up to that ×3, where you're getting some pretty insane damage increases on those attacks. You'll see in some of the footage how quickly it wipes out enemies, and this is a really good thing to have. But not only this, defeating targets with Combination Blow grants class ability energy and restores a small amount of health, so this obviously then builds back into that ability loop that we have going on. Goes without saying, as we've already discussed, we're taking Arc Bolt Grenade. That wouldn't be working the way that it does if we didn't use this grenade, and we'd probably just be wasting our time. So we are taking Tempest Strike, which is basically when you slide, you'll then hit your melee button. That will do an uppercut of Arc Lightning, and this will damage and jolt the targets again. So this also has jolt, meaning that we have another way of jolting our enemies in order to feed back into our Arc Bolt Grenades. And also defeating those jolted targets is going to grant a stack of Bolt Charge, meaning that we can get those lightning strikes causing even more damage. We're then pairing this with Ascension. I have tested this with both Lethal Current and also Flow State as well, but I feel like Ascension is the best way. One, for its maneuverability. If you get caught in one of those situations, which I seem to a lot at the moment, especially in Lawless Frontier, where you have those stasis shanks freezing you to the ground, you can use your Ascension to get out of that sticky situation before you get eaten by Cabal dogs. Not only this though guys, this is going to jolt all enemies that it hits underneath you as well, and it's going to amplify your allies as well, which is a nice buff to give to teammates. So we have 3 ways of jolting. Those are our Arc Bolt Grenade, those are our Tempest Strike, and also our Ascension as well. So all 3 of those abilities are causing jolt, meaning that we are feeding back into getting our Arc Bolt Grenades back, and as you'll see, we get them back crazy quick. Amplified is also important to the way that I have this build set up as well, and you'll see that now as we go through the fragments. So we'll be taking Spark of Resistance for some damage reduction. We'll be taking Spark of Ions. Defeating a jolted target or defeating a target with Bolt Charge creates Ionic Traces. Ionic Traces are fantastic for filling back up ability energy, and as you'll see, we're basically an Ionic Trace printing machine with this build. We then have Spark of Frequency. While amplified, the effects are increased and you gain increased stacks of Bolt Charge from all sources. That is all we care about really. But of course, we do get those nice stat bumps to reload speed and stability for our weapons as well. But realistically, we care about being amplified for that increased Bolt Charge. We then take Spark of Discharge. Arc Weapon Final Blows have a chance to create an Ionic Trace, but collecting an Ionic Trace grants you a stack of Bolt Charge. Again, if you feel you didn't need this, this is probably one you can flex out, but I feel this works pretty well within the build. The only other consideration you might want to make, whether you pick this one up or not, is the -10 to melee that you get. My build was okay with that, but of course that is a consideration depending on the stats of your armor. And then finally, we have Spark of Beacons. Again, this one could be considered a flex slot, but I like this just for having some more control in harder difficulty content. So while you're amplified, your arc special or heavy weapon final blows create a blinding explosion. So like I said, for the most part, we have abilities up near enough all the time, but obviously if something goes wrong for whatever reason, you die and you need to wait for those to build back up, this is something good that you can use in order to stop yourself from taking so much damage. As you know, when you blind an enemy, they basically just put their hands over their face, they're not fighting, they're not shooting at you, and it gives you a little bit of time to reposition and to figure out what's going on. Also, with Unstoppable Champions being more aggressive than some of the others, the limitations that we have with only Unstoppable Bow being the main anti-champion perk for that this season, it means that you are looking for other ways to do this. Then obviously blinding is a way that you can do this on Unstoppables. Blinding does stun Unstoppable Champions, just in case you weren't aware. For anything like that you're not sure, if you hover over stuff though, the tooltips will tell you that stuff. So basically guys, that is it for our subclass setup. We are using all of our abilities to jolt enemies, which feed back into our Arc Bolt Grenades. We've got Bolt Charge going on, we've got Blinding going on to disorient enemies as well, and we've got a lot of firepower in terms of our Tempest Strike, as well as obviously our Arc Bolt Grenades as well. So pretty simple, nothing too crazy, but it works very, very well with the changes that have been made, both to the Lucky Raspberry and also to the actual grenades themselves. In terms of the armor mods, which I'll pop up on screen for you now, nothing crazy going on. Yes, it is an ability spam build, but we are leaning into those grenades. So helmet, we've got double copies of Ashes to Assets. Every time we get grenade kills, we are going to get more super energy. We do get our super back quite quickly with this, as you'll see. We've got grenade fonts going on our arms, but obviously you can switch those out if you are able to achieve high grenade stat, which obviously you want that to be as high as you can. Then obviously you could use grenade fonts to top that up to 200 if you need to. And then we have Reaper and Powerful Attraction on the class item, which are also important as well, because using Ascension will count as using your normal dodge, so that will proc these perks as well, especially Powerful Attraction. Scooping up all of those orbs, getting that healing back because of recuperation on the boots is definitely helpful for some survivability for this build as well. In terms of your stats, it's kind of an odd one. You can almost play this however you wish. We are leaning, of course, into our class ability, our grenade, and also our melee as well. The super isn't incredible, like I said at the start. It is a little bit limited to super damage and things like that, so I wouldn't go too crazy on super. Honestly, my hunter armor isn't great, which is why the stats have come out the way they have. But in an ideal world, I would say that you want to try and aim for like 70 in melee and 70 in class if you can, and then dump the rest into grenade. You don't need to put your weapon stat too high, but again, if you do have that sort of option to build that up more than I have, obviously, like I said, my hunter armor isn't great, so these stats definitely could be better, but I've been able to solo on Grandmaster the Lawless Frontier activity, things like that, some of the other content on Ultimate as well, doing that solo fire team ops, that kind of stuff. So yeah, obviously, if you can get the stats better, that is going to be better for the build, guys. In terms of weapons, I've been flexing really with my kinetic slot. I've been using a few different options. Obviously, as you can see, I've got the gunburn on at the moment. Getting the actual blinding from the bewildering burst is helpful, as well as kinetic tremors also making orbs. But then in the second slot, this is where it's most important. You do want to have a good special arc weapon, guys. The PSI Turner IV is obviously very good. This comes with jolting feedback. Eddy current, obviously when you're amplified, gives you crazy reload. So this has been a really good one to proc that blinding from spark of beacons. So that's what I've been using, as well as using jolting feedback to apply that jolt if for whatever reason I haven't got my abilities. And then I'm actually using Thunderlord in my heavy slot at the moment, mainly because it's really good for dealing with Guardians, as you'll have seen in a couple of the clips. That guy had a really bad day trying to snipe me while I was just wiping him out with Thunderlord, so yeah, sorry about that, brother, but you know, you got to do what you got to do and all that. Thunderlord will also generate bolt charge as well, just to keep that crazy loop going on, and it is of course intrinsically overload as well, which does help with champions, like I said. But again, this is not needed. Any weapons which can jolt in feedback, those kind of perks are going to be really, really good for this build, so that is just down to your preference. But if you can use an arc weapon in both the special and heavy slots, that is going to go a long way to, obviously, like I said, taking advantage of Spark of Beacons. Because we're amplified all the time, you're going to be able to get that blind off often, whilst also just decimating everything with your abilities. Obviously, if you are loving the Praxic Blade at the moment, you could drop the exotic from Thunderlord and go with that instead. Build into that, into your artifact, and then obviously take advantage of all those crazy perks that are going on with that as well. So that is an option as well. Like I said, you just really want to have that arc weapon in there for that blinding, but if you don't care about that, you can drop Spark of Beacons and not really necessarily need to go with the arc weapons at all. The main thing is the ability loop and the ability uptime. So speaking of the artifact, that's another good thing about this build. Not required in any way. Dielectric definitely makes this build better. Defeating arc debuff targets grants bolt charge. Rapidly defeating them spawns orbs of power and heals a small portion of health. Counter energy, again, giving you some ability energy back for your least charged ability when you stun champions, is also very good as well. And then gravitic voltaic charge, while you have an arc or void super equipped, you get more armor charge. So they're all things that you could use. Elemental siphon perhaps as well, but like I said, there is nothing in here that is definitely needed. So if you want to build into that Praxic Blade and go with those perks, you absolutely can, but the build will function of itself without needing any artifact perks. So the build loop as it is, guys, it doesn't really matter, as I said, because all three of the main abilities that we've got, the Ascension, the Tempest Strike, and also the grenade itself, they all jolt, so it's not like you have to do a setup with one or the other. Tends to be the way that I do it, though, is to throw the Arc Bolt Grenade in there first, go in there with a Tempest Strike and then Ascension, and then just go back and loop around with those abilities in that way. If you're using that arc weapon, once you are amplified, you can then blind things that are further away as well, such as snipers, and that's basically it, guys. There's really nothing to it. So in terms of my thoughts on this, it isn't meta, guys. It isn't. The main problems with it that stop it from being meta is A, survivability. Obviously, when you've got things that exist like Devour on Void subclasses or Restoration on Solar classes, Arc just really doesn't have that same level of survivability. Obviously, when it comes to Prismatic, you've got other options that you can mix for survivability as well, which you don't really have on that Arc subclass. So that's one of the reasons that I wouldn't necessarily call it meta. That is one of the drawbacks of this build. And the other is the super, guys. Like, obviously, there are some good supers with the Hunter, but in the Arc class specifically, they just aren't. It's very versatile in the fact that you can use it for crowd control, tick damage, and you can also use it on single targets as well. But the damage of the Gathering Storm just isn't that fantastic. When you've got options at the moment, like the previous build that we did the other day for the Warlock with the Storm Dancer's Brace and the Arc Super on that, that is absolutely crazy for clearing, and it chunks bosses as well, and you just don't have that on the Hunter. So unfortunately, I don't think we can call this build meta as such, but it is definitely way more viable viable in endgame that it has ever been. Would I use this as my first pick for a solo build? Probably not, but as part of a team, it's definitely going to shine. But like I said, for the super and obviously for the survivability of the build, I just don't think that we can necessarily call it meta, especially as we are getting some small healing from things like dielectric, which aren't always going to be around. Anyway, guys, just wanted to put that in there as a disclaimer, because I'm not one of these people that's going to tell you that something is absolutely busted, you can never die, you're invincible, all this stuff, if that isn't the case. Either way, though, it is very fun, it is very viable for endgame, and it's way more powerful and easy to use than it's ever been before. So as I said, guys, link is going to be down in the pinned comment down below for the actual build itself. Let me know down in the comments what builds you're loving right now, or if you've tried anything like this one in particular. And if you would like to subscribe, I'll completely leave that up to you. But I do have a ton more builds on the way, and hopefully you guys have been enjoying what I've been doing so far. Either way, though, I hope you have a good day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.